Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Schembri, and on behalf of TradeMalta, I welcome you to this webinar. Today, we're discussing what will happen on the 1st of January when the United Kingdom will officially and practically leave the European Union. Brexit has dominated the political and economic agenda in Europe for a number of years now, but it seems that now it's happening. The UK is a major trading partner for Malta. We have many companies who either export products to the United Kingdom or service goods or are involved in projects in the UK or do investment services for UK clients. And therefore, rightly, a lot of companies have been asking what will happen to doing business in the UK from January 1st, which is just over 40 days from now. So that's what we will be discussing here today. As always, like in all other webinars, we will take your questions after we have interventions from the speakers. Today, we're very lucky and honored to have with us the new British High Commissioner in Malta, Her Excellency Katie Wood, who will be available to make an intervention and answer some of our questions around Brexit and what will happen from January 1st, which, as I said, is just a few weeks away. Ambassador Wood has been representing the United Kingdom in various countries in Africa, Europe, including Brussels and Latin America. Her last posting before arriving in Malta only last month was, in fact, as ambassador of the UK to Ecuador. Before I give the floor to Ambassador, to the High Commissioner, I'd like to remind you that you, as participants, as always, can send questions on the chat function of Microsoft Teams. We'll be able to read those questions both to the High Commissioner and to the other speakers we have with us today. I'll remind you later on, but we have speakers from the Department of Business in London with two very interesting presentations, and then we'll round up with a panel discussion in the end where we'll be able to take your questions. As in all other webinars, this webinar, apart from coming to you live now, will also be available on the TradeMalta website later on this week. And therefore, if you're interested in both that, all the other webinars we've been doing so far, visit trademalta.org, where you can find the webinars as well as information around them. High Commissioner, good morning to you, and thanks for accepting to be here today. I'd like to give you the floor now for some opening remarks on what's happening with the deal, at least what we know to date, and how you think it will affect the relationship between the UK and Malta, and especially Maltese companies involved in the UK already.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joe. And if I could just start by saying thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you to you and to Richard Sherry for organising, and to all of you who are taking part in the webinar today. So, as you rightly said, it's not long now till final EU exit. And as you rightly said, even though negotiations are still ongoing, whatever the outcome, whether we get a free trade agreement with the EU or not, it is really important for businesses and people to prepare for day one, which is the 1st of January 2021, because one way or the other, there will be changes. As I'm sure all the participants today are aware, the UK really wants to get a deal, and our negotiators have been working super hard for weeks and weeks and weeks with their European counterparts to try and get to an agreement. So currently the negotiators are still in Brussels, I believe, and they've been pretty much negotiating every day for some days now. We still hope that it's possible, but I think the position of the British government is that we want a deal, but not one at any price. It needs to be a deal which respects the UK's sense of sovereignty. But as I said, negotiators working super hard, so we very much hope that there will be a deal. In terms of what businesses in Malta can do to prepare, So we've got colleagues from the UK who are kindly going to be joining us today from our business ministry, basically, who are going to be able to answer some of your technical questions, I think. But I also wanted to flag, I'm sure you're aware of this, that the Maltese government is providing information and guidance online through its 153 helpline. And this week it launched the Brexit Be Prepared booklet. So this is quite recent, and I would urge everybody to download a copy. And the final brief thing I would like to say is that Minister Bartolo gave a few comments when all of this was launched last week. And in his address, he said that while we should allow the EU's special delegate to negotiate on our behalf on matters which fall within the Union's competence, as a sovereign state, i.e. Malta, we must also pay attention to our bilateral relations with the UK, which date back more than 2 centuries. In 2019, UK was Malta's #1 import partner. We, the UK, very much hope that that will continue to be the case, but to ensure that, what we need to do is to prepare. So that is the purpose of this webinar today. And again, thank you to the organisers for setting it up. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you for that. Like you quoted the minister as saying, essentially there is a relationship between the UK and Malta that goes back so long, and also, is so significant in terms of import, export, and the commercial relations between the two countries that obviously, whatever happens, both parties will be working to make that stronger and stronger. So thanks for that intervention. We have our first presentation on the movement of goods once Brexit actually happens on January 1st. And we have Julia Held, who's a team leader at the Department of Business Strategy and Industrial Strategy. Julia, if you're hearing us, and we'll give Julia some time as well to share her presentation. I believe I'm seeing Julia. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Hello. Hi. Welcome.
I'm about to share 1 second.
Fantastic. So we have a presentation.
Can you see this now?
I believe it is. Yes. Hi, Julia.
Okay,
you have
great.
the floor.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yes, good morning from my side as well. As Joe said, I work in the goods regulation team at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And today I'm going to give you a presentation or a general overview of the general regulatory issues that manufacturing business will need to consider when they plan to continue placing goods on the market in Great Britain from the 1st of January 2021. I will cover what to do when placing goods on the market in Great Britain after the transition period. And this includes labeling, conformity assessment, and the impact on legal responsibilities of economic operators. I need to note that these regulations are different from regulations for labeling of food and agriculture products. So this is purely for manufactured goods. This guidance does not apply to the placing goods on the market in Northern Ireland or to goods moving between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, but I will give you a brief overview later on the situation in Northern Ireland. However, you find further guidance on this on gov.uk. So as a manufacturer, the first thing to do is to check what regulations apply to your products. This presentation covers goods commonly known as new approach goods, which are identified by the CE mark currently. This will cover a variety of goods. Examples include children's toys, machinery, and PPE. The old approach refers to highly regulated goods such as cars, medicine, chemicals, and aerospace, which have detailed standalone models of regulations. Changes in these areas will be specific to the goods you are selling. I will touch on those industries today, but suggest you consult relevant guidance on gov.uk again. Non-harmonized goods are goods that are subject to national rather than EU-wide product rules. Furniture and musical instruments are examples for non-harmonized goods, and the mutual recognition will no longer apply for these goods from the 1st of January 2021. Therefore, you must make sure that your goods meet GB national requirements if you're placing them on the GB market. Other goods, these following slides will cover the changes that apply to most new approach goods, as I mentioned, although there are special rules for some goods, including medical devices, construction products, civil explosives, and products requiring eco-design and energy labeling. Again, I would recommend for those products to consult the sector-specific guidance on gov.uk. If you already placed CE marked goods on the EU or UK market before the 1st of January next year, you don't have to do anything. They can circulate freely until they reach the end user. This refers to existing stock and not product lines. So there are two main points to note when placing goods on the GB market. There's a new UKCA mark introduced next year to replace the CE marking in GB. For now, the essential requirements and standards for the UKCA mark are the same as for the CE mark. We recommend businesses to take steps to prepare for the upcoming changes to the domestic regime as soon as possible. However, to allow businesses time to adjust, CE marked goods can continue to be placed on the GB market until the 1st of January 2022 in most cases, and longer for some sectors such as medical devices. That is not to say that there won't be the possibility for divergence, but there won't be radical immediate changes for the sake of it. So from January 2022, you will need to use the new UKCA mark on most new goods destined for the GB market. Until the 1st of January 2023, for most new approach goods, you have the option to affix the UKCA marking on a label affixed to the product or on an accompanying document. Sorry. There we go. There are a few things you can do to ensure your product will be mark compliant. I will talk you first. I will talk through. I'll talk you through product labeling first. So, the CE marking. First of all, what do you need to know about the existing CE marking? As mentioned, you can use the CE marking until the 1st of January 2022 for goods placed on the GB market, longer in some cases. This is if you are self-certifying or you use a EU notified body. The UKCA marking. If you're using a UK body, you will need to use the UKCA marking. UK bodies will assess against GB rules from the 1st of January 2021 on. It is important to note that from the 1st of January 2021, the essential requirements and standards that can be used to demonstrate the compliance to the UKCA marking will be the same as they are now for the CE marking. So if you are currently self-certifying for the CE mark, you can also do so for the UKCA mark. Most new goods going on the GB market will be required to have the UKCA marking from January 2022, but you can start using the UKCA marking sooner. If you use the UKCA mark, you will need to draw up a UK declaration of conformity. This should be made available to market surveillance authorities on request. The information that need to be included on the UK Declaration of Conformity will be the same as what is currently required on an EU Declaration of Conformity, except the document should refer to UK legislation and not to EU legislation. You can place UKCA marking and CE marking on the same product if it is destined for both the GB and the EU markets, so long as the product meets the relevant regulatory requirements for both markets and neither impedes the visibility of the other. So I brought you a little timeline here to show that we are offering businesses time to adjust, and we're introducing our requirements over a period of time. So as mentioned, you can use the UKCA marking from the 1st of January on, and in some cases you will need to apply these immediately, but there are, or most goods, you can still use the CE marking until the end of 2021. So you will need to use the UKCA marking for most goods from the 1st of January 2022. And there are some exceptions like medicals where you can use it, where you can use the CE marking even longer. And then until the 1st of January 2023, for most goods, you can affix the UKCA marking on a label affixed to the product or on an accompanying document. And from the 1st of January 2023, the UKCA marking then must, in most cases, be affixed directly to your product. I will now cover what you need to do if your product requires mandatory third-party conformity assessment. For placing goods on the GB market, the big change is that UK-based notified bodies will become approved bodies from the beginning of next year. We're currently working on our own database, but to find out details, you can still check EU NANDO or the UK Accreditation Service website. If your product requires third-party conformity assessment currently, this will need to be done by a UK-recognized body from the 1st of January 2022 in most cases. However, we suggest you plan well ahead of this date. So for placing goods on the EU market from the beginning of next year, conformity assessments carried out by UK bodies won't be recognized in the EU unless agreed otherwise in negotiations, and will need separate UK and EU certificates. Voluntary testing and self-declaration won't be impacted. If the UK and the EU agree on a mutual recognition agreement during negotiation, you will be able to get your products assessed by conformity assessment bodies in each other's market. However, this doesn't mean markings will be recognized, e.g. UK bodies could assess against CE and EU bodies could assess against UKCA marking. But nothing that happens in negotiation will mean the need for UKCA will fall away. So you need to get ready for the UKCA mark either way. So just to reiterate, to ensure your product is market compliant, you should contact your notified body as soon as possible to understand options for assessment and certificates. And you will need separate certificates for the UK and EU markets in advance of the 1st of January 2022. There may be a requirement for a level of reassessment before the second certificate is issued, so you should start planning as soon as possible. It is important to be aware of how this impacts the legal responsibilities of economic operators. Some EU distributors of GB goods and some GB distributors of EU goods will become importers. So what does that actually mean? If you become an importer, you will need to indicate your name and address on the product, packaging, or on an accompanying document. You will need to keep a copy of the Declaration of Conformity. And you will need to ensure technical documentation can be made available to enforcing authorities upon request. For 24 months from the 1st of January 2021, for most new approach goods being placed on the GB market, this additional address can go on an accompanying document rather than on the product. From the 1st of January 2021, all authorized representatives for the GB market must be based in GB or Northern Ireland. And generally, authorized representatives are optional. UK-based authorized representatives will also no longer be recognized in the EU. There will be equivalent UK regulatory frameworks for most goods covered under the EU's old approach. So chemicals, EU and EEA-based companies who import chemicals into the UK under UK REACH must ensure that they are covered by a valid UK REACH registration. These companies can register the substance under UK REACH through a UK-based or an affiliate UK importer. If the EU EEA company takes on registration obligations through a UK-based entity, the UK customers will retain their downstream user status. aerospace. The UK Civil Aviation Authority currently oversees most aspects of civil aviation safety in the UK. After the transition period, the CAA will take on some additional functions from the European Aviation Safety Agency and will continue to ensure that the UK has world-leading aviation safety standards. The EASA regulatory framework will cease to apply to the UK at the end of the transition period. However, all current substantive EU requirements will be retained in UK domestic regulations. All EASA certificates, approvals and licenses in effect of on the 31st of December 2020 for use in the UK aviation system and on UK registered aircraft will be recognised by the UK CAA for up to 2 years or earlier if it would have otherwise expired. For the automotive sector, you should be aware that EC type approval will no longer be automatically accepted for motor vehicles on the GB market. And the UK Vehicle Certification Agency will issue provisional GB type approvals. Your business may also need to appoint new UK representatives. On medicines, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency will be the UK standalone medicines and medical device regulator, and stakeholders will need to get ready for new rules from the 1st of January 2021. Detailed guidance on clinical trials, licensing, batch testing, and other issues such as responsible persons can be found online. So, as I mentioned, I'm just giving you a brief overview of the different regime in Northern Ireland now, as so far we've focused on the GB market. So from the outset, it's worth explaining that the Northern Ireland Protocol applies from the 1st of January 2021, regardless of whether the UK and the EU agree a free trade agreement. Its purpose is to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And from a goods regulation point of view, the key thing to note is Northern Ireland will remain in regulatory alignment with the EU. In other words, goods will need to meet EU regulatory requirements to be placed on the market in Northern Ireland for as long as the protocol is in force. Note, this section of the presentation focuses on placing goods on the market rather than physical movements of goods. So we're not talking about customs requirements, etc. CE marking. As Northern Ireland will continue to align with EU rules, this means the CE marking will continue to be relevant, will be the relevant conformity marking for most new approach goods. You will need to use the CE marking if you self-certify or if you use an EU notified body to carry out conformity assessment. The UK NI marking is a new additional conformity marking for products placed on the market in Northern Ireland. It is only for those goods which have undergone third-party conformity assessment by a body based in the UK. It's only relevant to you if your good requires conformity assessment, your certificate is from a UK body, and you place those goods on the Northern Ireland market. If this is you, UK and I marking will be required from the 1st of January 2021, and you'll need to affix it in the same way as you affix the CE marking to your products. To note, you never apply the UK and I marking on its own. It always accompanies an EU and conformity marking. So it's always, for example, CE plus UK and I if you use a UK body. It's so goods assessed by UK bodies don't end up on the EU market, as the EU won't recognize our conformity assessment bodies unless agreed in negotiations. In terms of your declaration of conformity, you should continue to use an EU declaration, whether or not your product bears the CE marking alone or the CE marking plus the UK and I marking. So it's just CE if you self-certify or use an EU body, and it's CE plus UK and I marking if you use a UK body. And just to note that the UKCA mark alone will not be valid for the NI market, but it can be present on products that bear the correct marking. So you could add the UKCA marking to your products as long as it also has the relevant Northern Ireland markings on it. So this is it for me for now. My colleague Abby and I are very happy to take any questions later on during the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Great. Julia, thanks for that. Lots of changes coming up, it seems, from that presentation. I'm sure a lot of companies have started preparing for these changes. Just to remind our participants two minor things. First, both presentations will be available on the TradeMalta website later on today or tomorrow. And once again, please send us your questions. We're taking questions already, preparing the questions to be able to ask our guests later after our second presentation and another intervention by the High Commissioner. I now invite Amy Newland and her team. Amy will be doing a presentation this time on services. As we know, a lot of service companies from Malta are in fact involved with businesses in the UK on the services front. So Amy, if you're there and if you can share your presentation, we'll do now the service presentation with Amy and her colleagues. Amy, I can see you from here.
Thank you very much for that. So yes, thank you. We will take you through, give you a flavour of the changes in the services and investment sphere. So moving on to our first slide, just to give you a bit of an overview. And highlight that as well as the great news that the Maltese government have a Brexit Be Prepared booklet, we've also, the UK government has also launched a new public information campaign in European member states called Keep Business Moving to help your preparations for the end of the transition period. And you can see the web address of that in this slide, but we will also give you a few areas of more detailed information across the course of this presentation, where we will consider the services and investment overview, and then my colleagues will talk about business mobility and also the regulation of professional qualifications. We have in the UK one of the most open economies to foreign service providers and investors, and that won't change. But as with the messages from our colleagues on goods, there are some things that you will need to do to prepare for the changes coming. And the majority of these changes are true regardless of the agreement we ultimately reach with the European Union on our future relationship, because of course the UK will leave the single market and the customs union. So onto the next slide, and just a word on investment. So of course, as I said, we are leaving the single market. UK citizens will no longer benefit from the treaty freedoms on the freedom of establishment, and the UK will no longer extend the freedom of establishment to EU and EEA citizens. But very important to say that that EU citizens will not face restrictions on owning, managing or directing a company in the UK. We are an open economy, one of the biggest destinations for foreign direct investment in the world, and we very much welcome investment from other countries. We don't generally put restrictions on the ability of foreign nationals to run businesses. But here on this slide, one of the things you do need to know, which is if your company has an existing registered UK establishment, it will need to provide a small amount of additional information to our Companies House and publish additional information on customer-facing material. And those changes will come into force after a 3-month transitional period. And more information on gov.uk about this particular change. And then moving on to the next slide, just a word on some specifics for accounting and audit. So, information on reporting requirements for EEA companies and information for EEA auditors and firms can again be found on our gov.uk pages, and you'll see those links on the slides when you get hold of them. So those reporting requirements. If you are an EEA company with a UK listing, you can continue to use EU-adopted international financial reporting standards. If you're an intermediate EEA parent company owned by a UK parent, do check requirements for producing group accounts with your relevant competent authority. And on audit, if you are an EEA auditor and want to sign audit reports in the UK based on your EEA qualification, you must register as a UK statutory auditor with a UK recognised supervisory body before the 1st of January next year. And if you are an EEA audit firm, you may need to restructure to continue your EEA approval if your required majority of qualified owners and managers includes UK audit firms or individuals with UK audit qualifications. At this point, we will come on to business travel, and I'll pass over to my colleague Helena to talk you through the issues there.
Thank you, Amy. So I will provide a brief overview of some of the changes likely to come into effect from the 1st of January to cross-border mobility for business travel and temporary work. In terms of scope, this is the entry and temporary stay in another country for business purposes, and categories of temporary business mobility can broadly be broken down into the 5 areas on the screen. So this includes short-term business visitors, so short-term and short-notice visits, intra-corporate transfers, so transfers to a subsidiary or a branch of the same company in a different country, contractual service suppliers, so carrying out a contract to supply a service to a client in another country, independent professionals, so self-employed people hired for services in another country, and investors, so people who move temporarily to invest on behalf of a company. Next slide, please, Callum. Thank you. So from January 2021, business travel requirements will change. UK nationals moving to the travelling to the EU, EEA and Switzerland should ensure that they are familiar with the requirements for business travellers in each of the member states that they intend to travel to as soon as possible. For example, checking if UK nationals will need a visa, work permit or other documentation, checking how to apply, and checking that your passport is still valid. The same is true for EU, EEA and Swiss nationals planning to travel to the UK for business purposes should check the visa requirements, how to apply and any other requirements such as passport validity ahead of travel. And this information can be found on gov.uk. Next slide please, Callum. Thank you. So in terms of activities that may require a visa, so regardless of the outcome of negotiations, UK nationals travelling to the EU, EEA and Switzerland may need to apply for a visa, work permit or other documentation before travelling. Last year, the EU agreed that UK nationals will be able to travel visa-free to the Schengen area for short-term visits, so up to 90 days in a period of 180 days, for a limited number of business activities, such as business meetings. Some member states will also allow additional permitted activities as part of the domestic immigration system for short-term visa-free visits, and UK nationals are advised to check the requirements of the member state or member states that they are planning to travel to. If a UK national is planning to stay longer than 90 days in a period of 180 days, or are carrying out activities not included on the list of visa-free activities in the respective member state, a visa, work permit or other documentation may be required. And again, we recommend that UK nationals check every member state that they are planning to travel to, the specific requirements ahead of time. For EU, EEA and Swiss nationals planning to travel to the UK for business purposes, from the 1st of January 2021, they will be considered third country nationals in the UK. That means that EU, EEA and Swiss nationals coming to the UK to perform certain business activities will be able to do some visa-free for a period of up to 6 months. These permitted visa-free activities are listed on the rules for visitors on gov.uk, and we've included a link in this presentation. The UK's domestic rules also allow a small number of paid activities to be carried out visa-free, and these can also be found on gov.uk and will be included under permitted paid engagements. For stays of longer than 6 months, or for a short-term activity not included in the visa-free rules under the UK immigration system, EU, EEA and Swiss nationals will require a visa. In cases where a visa is required, EU, EEA and Swiss nationals can apply through the points-based system, and further information can be found on gov.uk. Thank you, Callum.
So we'll now bring in Daisy Cummins from the Department for Business on recognition of professional qualifications.
Thank you very much, Amy. The recognition of professional qualifications is a process which I'm sure many professionals in Malta will already be familiar with, seeing as it is necessary to ensure if you are providing a service which is regulated in another member state, that you seek recognition of your professional qualifications in that member state to ensure that you do have the correct authorisation to operate in that territory. And that principle continues on for operating in the UK as well. It's worth mentioning, of course, that there are different ways of regulating a profession, and in the UK, in some professions there's a requirement to have a formal recognition of your qualifications. In some professions there is a requirement to register, and in some professions there's a combination of both of those things, and in some cases also an assessment of your current professional experience as well, and a requirement to evidence that. Now, it's worth pointing out that for any professionals who already have a recognition decision from a UK regulatory authority, that is, they have already secured recognition of their professional qualification, that will be secured for life, and there is no need to take any sort of further action. But if you have not already sought qualification recognition of any professional qualifications that you have, and you provide services into the UK in that regulated profession, then you should do so as soon as possible. We would encourage all applicants to reach us before the 31st of December, although there will be provisions for qualification recognition after the transition period ends as well. So I think we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So you should take action as soon as possible to provide that regulated service in the UK. It's worth pointing out that up until the 31st of December, the additional resource that you will have available to you is the European Commission database on regulated professions. You'll be able to use that database to check whether or not the profession that you work in is regulated in the UK, and that data will remain available on that database for anybody to use until the end of the transition period. After that point, you will be able to contact the UK National Assistance Centre to find out how to get your professional qualification recognised. So UK NARIC are a body which the UK government uses as a proxy to help both professionals based in the UK and professionals coming to the UK work out which regulatory authorities they need to be in contact with in order to get their qualifications recognised correctly and well in advance. So it's worth pointing out that there is this additional resource that you can use all the way up to the 31st of December, but after that point, the main tool you should use is the UK National Assistance Centre website. They have, you can contact them by email. They also have a live chat function, as well as a telephone line that you can call to seek advice about how to contact the correct regulatory authority for the particular profession in which you trade in services. But both the database and the UK National Assistance Centre will be able to direct you to the correct contact so that you can start a dialogue with that regulator who will explain the procedure to you in order to get your qualification recognised so that you can continue to deliver regulated services into the UK. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Daisy and Amy and your colleagues. Thanks for providing us with such a kind of both detailed presentations, but also presentations that deal with all the different facets of within, for example, services or goods, all the things that and the new regulations that will come into effect. This is, of course, a major transition for the UK and for all the companies, in this case based in Malta, doing business in the UK. And I guess the main message from the two presentations is companies should get in touch with the right regulatory bodies and find information. We today mentioned the website and the call center that even the government of Malta has available for this purpose. So thanks both teams for the presentation. I'll turn to the High Commissioner, if you don't mind. And I have a couple of questions before we move on to questions taken from the participants. One thing I wanted to ask you is, we've been, following Brexit for a number of years now, and many companies, I guess, they tend to get a bit complacent. The deadline has been moving so much that people essentially don't take it seriously. Is it happening this time?
I think the answer is yes, Joe. So one way or the other, there will be change on from the 31st of December this year, so all companies need to prepare. So, as I said earlier, the UK still very much hopes we'll be able to secure an agreement, but whether we do or whether we don't, as the presentations from colleagues in London show, there will be changes coming, and so businesses need to prepare, yes.
I've heard Prime Minister Johnson saying a couple of days ago that Britain would prosper, kind of without an agreement. Does that mean that the UK might go out of the EU without a basic free trade agreement?
Yes, it does mean that. So I think the Prime Minister has been very clear that he would like a deal with the European Union, but not at any cost. So he is looking for a deal which protects UK sovereignty, and that's what our negotiators are trying to agree currently. So the government's position is, yes, we very much want a deal, and we still all hope that it will be possible, and that's what the negotiators are working hard on. But if there isn't one, in his view, in the view of the British government, the British economy has so many underlying strengths that there will obviously be a sort of impact of leaving the European Union without a deal, but that the British government, the British economy will continue to prosper.
One thing which I kind of struggle with sometimes is I imagine, both the UK and the EU want to create, this famous, level playing field between the two, which basically means that the UK would have to abide by, health and safety regulations and other regulations that are usually, governed by Brussels. Do you think it's attainable to have access to the common market without being bound by these regulations?
I think, I think anybody who's following the EU exit negotiations carefully will see that two of the remaining outstanding issues are what's called the level playing field, as well as fisheries is another one. So obviously it is key for competition that businesses should be operating on the same principles. And I think that is currently one of the areas. I mean, it's complex, it's detailed, but that the negotiators are working on. And it does seem as though progress has been made and is being made. So I think it's attainable. But I think the underlying sort of question you're asking me is it right that there should be some kind of level playing field? Yes. And I think the UK realise, obviously, we want our businesses as well to be able to compete on similar bases. It's just a question of how you work out what that looks like in practice with us leaving the EU.
One thing we're hearing a lot about in the last few days, I would say, is this, Canada style or model. Can you tell us something about that?
I think... I think what the British government means by that is that what it's looking at is that the EU has negotiated a range of different trade agreements with different countries, including one with Canada. And so that the British government sees no reason why it should be impossible to negotiate something similar to what has been agreed with Canada for the UK, one which respects sovereignty. So obviously there are differences here because Canada wasn't formally a member of the European Union. There are geographical proximity differences and other. But the UK, uses that example to say this is possible, it ought to be possible, and let's do something similar.
Yeah. One final question I have before we turn to participant questions. You've been High Commissioner for only a few weeks here in Malta.
Yes.
How are you finding it, first of all? And, is your office working with the Maltese government around, Brexit and preparing, the transition?
Yeah. So, yes, I've only been here for a few weeks, and I'm finding I'd never been to Malta before being appointed here. So I think it's spectacularly beautiful. So I've been hiking in Comino and in different places.
Okay.
And
I haven't been there for a while.
It's lovely. It's beautiful. So, so my initial impressions are kind of stunned by the beauty of Malta and the warmth of the Maltese people. In terms of your question about is the High Commission working with the Maltese government? Yes, and different organisations within Malta to prepare for EU exit. And this, I would say today, Joe, is an example of that. But the team is very actively engaging with various institutions in Malta, including Identity Malta and others, on preparations citizens need to make, both our citizens based in Malta and Maltese citizens based in the UK, regarding residency and other administrative changes. And we are trying to organise, there's an information campaign going on, which the High Commission is promoting in order to encourage everybody, both businesses and citizens, to prepare.
Thank you very, very much. Listen, High Commissioner Ward, thanks for being with us this morning, for finding time. This is probably one of your, first appointments, I guess, officially, while on your mission here in Malta. I know that the High Commissioner would need to leave us now. We are actually, we have someone else from the British High Commission who will be with us to take questions that we have now clearly from the participants, and the questions will also be available for the speakers, which we have from London, and we can take some of the questions there from there as well. The High Commissioner mentioned before a telephone line that exists to help companies. There's a Maltese government website which we will be promoting on the TradeMalta website later on, and that is also useful for companies to go on to and find the information. As per the presentations we've had before, there's a lot of changes. A lot of it is regulatory, and therefore companies need to really be prepared to make the transition and kind of find information. So it is our duty, I think, to provide you with as much information as possible. And on the TradeMalta website, sometime later on today and tomorrow, we will in fact be providing you with this information. It's time now to move to your questions. We have some questions already on the screen. Thanks again for the British High Commissioner for being with us this morning. We have now Mr. Michael House also from the British High Commission, who will be with us. And in fact, we already have some questions. I was going to, in fact, take some of the questions. The first one we have, incidentally, rather than a question, is a comment. Someone is saying the Maltese government has a website dedicated to the questions companies might have on Brexit. It's actually www.brexit.gov.mt. Thanks, our participant, for that. Yes, brexit.gov.mt is a website by the Maltese government on everything to do with this transition between now and the 1st of January. I'll take a second question. If a service company has a subsidiary in the UK, how will things change for that company? So this is a service company with a subsidiary in the UK. I think our colleagues from London are probably best positioned to try to address this question. Amy and anyone from your team?
Thank you very much for the question. So as I said in my presentation, we are EU citizens won't face restrictions on owning, managing or directing a company in the UK. I would say not a big change on subsidiaries, but I also talked about reporting requirements and Companies House. And I would really recommend that you use those links to explore how auditing and reporting requirements may change for your company. And as those links will be available on the presentation.
Okay, thanks for that. Your colleague before, Amy, mentioned the new visa requirements. I'd like a further clarification on that, because you have a lot of companies in Malta providing services by sending people from Malta to a company in the UK or an authority in the UK to service. This could be software, this could be any other services, and engineering, etc. Could you clarify a little bit? From what I understood, if I have a company in Malta and want to send an employee to service a company in the UK, for the first 6 months, there is no visa requirement. Can you tell us how that is going to work?
Sure, thank you. So there are some permitted business activities that will be able to be carried out in the UK visa-free. And this list of specific activities is included on gov.uk under Rules for Business Visitors. However, if an activity is not included under that list, even if the activity may be for less than 6 months, EU, EEA and Swiss nationals may need to apply for a visa in advance. So it is very much recommended that individual companies and individuals planning to travel to the UK should check the specific requirements for their specific circumstances ahead of travel. You can sign up to notifications on gov.uk to be updated if the rules change, and there is more information on how to seek clarification for your particular circumstances on gov.uk. So it's not quite as straightforward as if it's less than 6 months, it is visa-free. It does depend on the type of activities that you're planning to carry out in the UK.
So companies in Malta, for example, would still need to register and let some authority in the UK know that they will be sending people regularly, for example, to the UK for servicing. Is that the case?
I'm afraid it will depend on the type of company, the type of activities they're planning on doing. I'm happy to take away specific questions and talk to my colleagues in the Home Office to provide a written response. However, the main advice that I would have is to check the UK government website to see the specifics of your circumstances.
Okay. We have another question on intellectual property. I'm not sure if one of you can handle this. Will the situation with intellectual property of a product or a service patented in Malta, for example, to cover at the moment, the whole of the EU territory, how will that change? I'm not sure if, you are the kind of authority to answer this.
I'm afraid we're not the authority to answer this. There are discussions about intellectual property through the negotiations between the UK and the EU, and the UK government is committed to protecting intellectual property to a very high level, but I'm afraid I can't give you any more specifics.
We have another question on the pound sterling. Should businesses, because of this change, expect any bump or any effect on the exchange? And I'm not sure if I can probably draw Michael to this discussion here in the studio, or anyone who is from your Department of Business in London. Because obviously the rate of exchange, tends to make a huge difference for obviously companies based in Malta contracted by UK parties. Amy.
I have to say, as Department of Business officials, we're not qualified to predict. But I mean, I think we've seen throughout the kind of various events along the UK's departure from the EU that some events do indeed affect the exchange rate, and depending on whether we see news of a deal and what that deal looks like, I would expect the markets to respond. But I must emphasise that is not a UK government line.
Fair enough. Michael, I'm not sure if you want to comment on this.
I would only echo what Amy has just stressed. I mean, the markets are the markets, and they are what they are, as we all know, and we'll see how they react to whatever emerges from the negotiations, and I wouldn't want to predict that. But I think it just goes back to the point where businesses need to plan and prepare and decide what they need to do in their own sphere, looking ahead to next year.
Another question we have is about whether companies can participate in EU funding. Companies or authorities in Malta might want to partner with a UK party agency to participate in an EU project. I'm not sure whether January 21st will mean a stop to all participation of UK entities in EU projects, or whether that's not the case.
Sorry, just to reiterate, so UK companies
or UK
funds.
agencies at the moment participating in EU-funded projects?
Well, that will all depend on in some cases, the outcome of the negotiations. But I think the point is that the UK remains an open and vibrant economy that is open to collaborating in any way it can on the future of business. Whether that's accessing EU funds or not, I think that will depend on what's available at the time. But there will be changes, and there will be funds and areas where the UK will no longer have access to. Yeah. That is the consequence of leaving the EU.
I guess. Would you imagine, or would you think that there are certain sectors that will be more impacted than others? And having been in Malta now for a few years and knowing the economy, some sectors may be being impacted more than others by this change.
Well, I mean, from my experience, it's not looking at individual companies and sectors. I think everybody has to make their preparations and to plan ahead. Clearly, there are very strong links on things like pharmaceutical industry with the UK because of the language issue. But those are the sort of things that we work with the Maltese government, and businesses are already preparing for and doing what they can to make the change in the new year.
Interesting. Thanks, Michael. We have an interesting intervention by Emanuele Vignoli, who had to be with us. He is from HSBC. HSBC are our partners in TradeMalta in general, and Emanuele is from the head office in London as well. It's a longish kind of question or statement, but I'll attempt to kind of try to summarize it while reading it. So that one of the most significant items up for negotiation, Emanuele is saying, is the UK's future direct access to euro clearing and settlement mechanisms, and vice versa, which is known as passporting. If no agreement is reached, these passporting rights might, in fact, be in jeopardy. I'm not sure if, again, one of our colleagues in the UK or Michael here, is aware of what will happen to passporting rights in financial services. As you know, we have a substantial financial services industry in Malta, where passporting rights have been traditionally an important driver of their kind of business models. Amy or your colleagues, maybe anyone knows about passporting rights?
Again, I'm afraid that's our colleagues at the Her Majesty's Treasury who are working on that, I'm sure some of your audience will be aware of the approach the UK has taken to negotiations on financial services, and kind of echoing Her Excellency's comments about our general need for the UK to kind of regain sovereignty. Some of you will have seen what's happened there, but as I say, we are not from Her Majesty's Treasury who lead on that.
Agreed. Okay, so I'll while we're waiting for even more questions coming in, and again, we won't be able to answer all questions, but we'll try to answer your questions even on a one-to-one basis after this webinar. But I'd like to introduce Michael. Again, Mike, thanks for being with us. You've been in Malta for some time, so I guess you've seen, not just our economy, but you've seen the Brexit process itself, unfolding over the last few years. What has been, your interaction with businesses and with other stakeholders in Malta? How prepared do you think we are in general?
Well, it's been quite a long process, actually, taken up over the 3 years that I've been here. But throughout of that process, business has been one of the key elements that we have engaged with regularly meeting with organisations, business leaders. If more than anything, just to get a sense from them what their thoughts are, what their intentions are, what their plans are in the future. Because I think one of the main things that the UK government wants to continue to do is ensure that trade continues. And we've heard today the fascinating discussions already in relation to what is being put in place, because there are going to be changes. And we always knew that those changes would come because the UK will be leaving the single market and the customs union. And I think it's important that the process is really about dialogue and understanding how those changes are going to take place, what companies and businesses will need to do. And that's something that we will continue doing even after the 1st of January, because there will be this kind of ongoing, well, it's not so much a transition period, but there will be this ongoing new environment of which business will be operating, and we need to continue that dialogue.
I guess so. I think that's very, very important. Listen, we've nearly come to an end of this webinar. I'd like Michael perhaps to round up a little bit. From the High Commission's perspective, you being in Malta, but at the same time being in the thick of what's happening in these very interesting times between now and the 1st of January, and I guess immediately after that date. So, Michael, I'd ask you to round up with some concluding remarks, and then we'll round up the webinar after that.
Well, thank you, Joe. I mean, what I would say has been a very fascinating webinar, and I think it's been well needed. And I think business, I hope, will be looking to learn from this exercise. But if anything that's come out of this, it is the fact that there is going to be change, and we should not underestimate the requirement for business to plan and to prepare over the coming weeks. I think what we now need to do is provide all the wealth of information that's already out there. I think the Maltese government has provided plenty of information, has already been suggested. There's lots of information on the .gov.uk website about this, and I would urge business to look at this, to take it on board, see what they need to do, and prepare adequately for the 1st of January when there's going to be change. But my final concluding remark will be that the UK economy is open, it's ready for business, it's ready for the new business operating environment, and we want that to continue. And I have every faith that the Maltese-UK business relationship will go from strength to strength in this new environment.
Michael, thanks for those words in conclusion. I only need to remind you of the final webinar in the series that's coming up next week, and that's going to be on building resilient organizations. It's a very interesting discussion. We have speakers from the UK and speakers from Malta as well. So once again, I'd like to thank the British High Commission, the High Commissioner Award, as well as Mr. Michael Holmes here as well, our two teams of speakers from the Department of Business in London, HSBC, our strategic partners in general, my colleague Richard, Christine, and others. In this case, our colleague from the British High Commission, Sue Elliott. I'd like to leave you with this. Next week we'll be here as well for the final webinar, and more information is available on trademalta.org. So that's all from me, George Kembry, for now. See you next week.